So I am honored to introduce Rodney Milton, who is the executive director of the Urban Land Institute here in Colorado. Rodney is an expert on helping us frame the potential with the real. So here's the actual infrastructure, but what's possible with it? Where are the ways in which we can leverage this? How can this possibly be a piece of an integrated regenerative system that helps us build more deeply and more sustainably? So please attend to Rodney Milton.
So I've been tasked with solving this problem for you, and I got about 10 minutes. So all jokes aside, I think, first of all, go Avs. Let's start there. And I say that because you've been slightly depressed all day, right? We've been hearing about how dire the situation is, about how close to something like the apocalypse we all really are. And the challenge with that is that when you tell human beings that something is enormous and almost impossible, it tends to paralyze them. That's the response that you actually get. It tends to paralyze folks. It says, well, it's too big. We can't solve it. I would reverse that. So if I was to take a picture of all of you right now, just right now, and got everybody in the frame, what's the first thing you would do when you got that picture back?
Cut me out of it.
Why? Oh, you think, so what Tom, funnily, comedically actually solved my problem, which is you look for yourself first. Did I blink? Is my scarf in order? Right? You look at yourself first. So one of the things about planning when it's done well is it situates the individual within the community and tries to enable them to problem solve at the scale that they're at. So I'm going to show you a picture of all these issues, problems, and you find yourself in it, and then we'll build the plan around you. So I'll say a couple of things on this slide, and then I'll move forward. One of the thing that picture would allow you to do is get a vision of what your community consists of too. Now, obviously, first, again, you look at yourself, and then once you realize I am handsome, cute, or I did blink, then you start to see everybody else, and you realize I'm not in this by myself because 3 other people blinked, and so I have a community of people who don't know how to take pictures, and you have a camaraderie. But part of planning, I was a teacher before I was a planner, and so I like to break things down into things that you can actually digest. And I always used to say planning is really about going to the grocery store. You can go to the grocery store with money and no list, and you will end up with Cheez-Its, Cheetos, ice cream, and if you're hungry, you're definitely going to be irrational about the way that you approach that grocery trip. Or you can go with an entire list and no money. You have to have both. And so active, integrated, transformative, and action-oriented planning has both of those things. It has you standing outside saying, what kind of person do I want to be before I go into this grocery store that has all of these options? I got to list it out as to what it is I'm trying to accomplish. Am I on a diet? Is it my cheat day? All these things. And then you've got to have the budget in order to actually make any of those decisions possible, right? Same thing for planning. That's what I used to do as a planner. I would get with folks and say, okay, what is the vision? What is it that we want to be as a city, as a state, as a region, all of those things? What are the items within that planning or that list that are critical for our vision to be made whole? So housing is like milk or water. Bread is like transportation, right? Cookies are potentially luxury items. You need a balance of nutrition, I would say. Equity that's like water. I'd say that would be water. All right, so let me read this for you because you may not be able to see it. A successful vision should consider the opportunities that are unique to a place. I grew up in Colorado. I moved away before I hit high school. I don't know if that makes me a native or not, but I'm here to help, right? So you can reject or accept me. But this place is unique. It's not like the other communities that I've planned in. Rocky just scared the crap out of me and realized that you guys don't even have an integrated planning structure. That's crazy. Sorry. So it's a unique place. Your community DNA result from an understanding of current conditions. That's the market reality. You can dream all you want. Remember, I told you, you can make that list as long as deep as possible. If the market, contrary to popular belief, does not function, then those realities aren't made whole. And carry the multiple voices and dreams of its inhabitants. That's the community vision, right? So really quickly about ULI, I'll give my little commercial speech. I always say jokingly, how do I explain my job to my mom? Right, because I'm from the public side. I used to work for City of Atlanta for a long period of time, actually City of Aurora most recently. It was simple for my mom to explain my job. He works for the mayor. Not quite, but yes, that works. But for ULI, what the heck do I do, right? I like to say it like this, and this is what I explained to my mom. Urban Land Institute is an organization whose members shape cities and create places. That work is incredibly important and impactful. And if you do it wrong, the consequences are dire for a lot of different communities. So you got to collaborate. You have to talk. You have to problem solve. You got to get a lot of different people in the room. And that's what I do. So I save the world. But that's what the Urban Land Institute is writ large. It's a global organization. This is my absolute favorite slide. I was a member of APA, American Planning Association. They're primarily planners. ULI is a diverse body of folks. It's got planners, it's got architects, it's got government and nonprofit, it's got attorneys, it's got brokers, it's got engineers, it's got a lot of different folks. Because the solutions that we need to come up with and the problems that we're facing has to have a diverse, very diverse membership. And so we're 45,000 members. All that means to you is somebody in there can solve some kind of problem that you are facing, right? Hopefully. In Colorado, we're 1,400 members. That means from a solution set we can bring to bear any one of those 1,400 members or their friends for a particular problem that you're facing in your community, right? All right, frameworks for equitable change. Oh, I didn't even know I did that. Okay, couple things I'm gonna try to do. I'm gonna give you a couple examples of planning efforts that have integrated both equity, both action, and both vision. And I should have probably started with vision in their planning documents as an approach to organizing all of your collective desires, right? So imagine all of us had to go downstairs and develop the menu for we're gonna eat, or go into that grocery store like I said before. Some of you are vegan, some of you are pescatarian, some of you are like my son who's vegetarian except for when we go to Chick-fil-A. So it would be extraordinarily difficult. So this planning effort in Georgia has, and this is, like I said, I grew up in Denver. I moved right before high school. I was in Florida. That's why I was laughing at the Florida example, because they've totally changed what they do. And then I moved to Atlanta. I was in Atlanta planning for almost over a decade. I was in charge of, myself and my assistant director were in charge of creating the comprehensive development plan for the city of Atlanta. And it had all those elements. So if you have at your table that beautiful diagram and chart, I love maps and I love diagrams. I'm a super nerd. But each one of those elements we had to tackle. So you had housing, you had infrastructure, you had community goals and visions and all of those things, right? It ended up being a compliance document though. Because when we go out to the community, and Atlanta's very unique because Atlanta's broken down into 25 neighborhood planning units. This was the innovation of Maynard Jackson, one of the first Black mayors of Atlanta. He said, I want the community to have a vision. He broke the city up into 25 little units that included neighborhoods within it and said, you all will have a voice in what it gets built in your communities. So they do permitting, Every month, the community comes, so there's the police, fire, all of that, and explains what's happening. It's messier than you would ever imagine. I actually had to staff several of them, so I came out alive. But you get feedback from them. They write down all their goals, their wishes, their objectives. And ideally, when a planning effort comes to their community, you go back to that plan and say, is it consistent with that plan? And that's the community's voice. Right? It should be frictionless in the sense that it shouldn't be project by project. You should have an understanding as a developer what it is that community will tolerate and what it doesn't, and it embeds it in that. I thought that was brilliant. But we had a new commissioner. And that new commissioner said, I'm coming into this city and I have no idea what this city wants to be when it grows up. We have to start there first. So as a relatively newcomer, or at least my family being newcomers, one of the things you have to establish, both as the Front Range, as a metro, as a region, as a state, is what do you want to be when you grow up, Colorado? Because if you don't have that vision, you're going to get a lot of missteps. You're going to run out of water. I love that we started this conversation with a dire calling from someone who's probably going to bear the brunt of all of that and not have the necessary equipment to survive it. And she's going to blame all of you. Me too. Right? So this process, Atlanta City Design, was different from the standard that comprehensive development plan was one thing, and it is mandated. So the commissioner comes in, tells my 2-person team, go ahead, do it. I'm not going to really support you because I know you have to get it done, right? And do whatever you have to do to get it done. But that's not what's going to guide what we do in this city. This process is. And so he comes in and he starts from the ground up. What are the physical, natural constraints of our city? What are the natural environmental ways in which we came to be? Started with the indigenous, started with the way they mapped the land, way they traversed the land, and then laid that as our foundation. He then coupled that with how we as in the city of Atlanta had grown from there. Rail was the primary transportation vehicle for the city of Atlanta. It's called Terminus originally, and laid that as a foundation. And then coupled on to that, he then said, okay, culturally, who are we? So does anybody know who that is? Who is that? That's right. Who else knows? Raise your hand. That's right. That's Andre 3000. There's no way you're going to have a plan for the city of Atlanta without one of its founding cultural members. That's bold to say we are going to embrace the culture of hip hop in our visionary plan that we walk around the entire city, the world with. Is Colorado prepared to do that? Ooh, that was quick. That was quick. That was quick. But see, you got to be in an environment where those things can't not happen, right? You can't not. The city would not have allowed us to go through a planning process without centering the cultural heritage that is dominating the world now, right? So I just returned from Mexico City on a trip with the Downtown Denver Partnership. This time, yesterday, I was in Mexico City, and which is probably why I'm tired right now and I'm rambling because I'm off of some coffee. That's pretty strong. I like that. But anyway, to wrap this up, started with the urgency, started with the design. You can't see this, but the implementation side of it means we take that book, which is a beautiful book. I'll give you all the links to it. And it guided the city's decision-making process, how it budgeted its activities, how it tackled housing affordability. And if you don't have something like akin to a governing document like that, that can hold people accountable when they deviate from or violate those principles, that is informed by a collective action-oriented decision-making process. I'm using a lot of words here. That's the coffee again. Then you're going to get what you get. You're going to walk into that grocery store. Now Colorado has some money. You do. ARPA funds, I think the mayor mentioned ARPA funds. You have some resources. What are you going to do? You're going to buy chocolate cake? because that's the most immediate thing that you want, or are you going to plan and orient yourselves? So I'll move really quickly. That was one process that I could go into further detail. I'll encourage you. You got a long weekend. Hopefully, we're out on Monday for Juneteenth, and so you may have some time to read that. But I would encourage you to read that. Really quickly, in terms of action, the zoning process that was embedded in that document, I personally embedded it in the mayor's affordable action plan for housing, because one of the land uses that is antithetical to affordability is single family. So one of the other things that you'll have to do, and me as the ULI executive director, is I intend to continue this conversation, but I intend to center contradictions in the middle of it. Because you have fundamental contradictions that you're trying to weigh. You're saying we want, job growth, but we want affordability. We want you don't want density. We want open spaces and recreation, but we want people to have places to live. Ooh, those are tough, okay? This is the last, I just want to really run through this planning effort. Oh, I'm good? Okay, good. You shouldn't have told me that. This effort was when you have growth or anticipated growth, and this is what I put in the planning documents that govern the city's approach, retention, community retention. What that model does is it goes into a community, and instead of typically, how many planners do we have in here? Yeah, these are my people. All of you are my people. But these are special because we speak a totally different language that nobody but ourselves we know. My wife most certainly doesn't speak this language. But we do existing conditions, right? You come in, you do demography, you do existing conditions, you don't do vulnerability though. You don't do, if we invest and these things happen, who's most likely to be impacted in a negative way on this particular project or this particular development or this particular catalyst. There's an entire method that you can embed into your planning that A, identifies those most vulnerable, B, identifies solutions to help those most vulnerable. So one of them was, and this is in the middle of the pandemic, I worked not only for the city of Atlanta, but I then transitioned to the Atlanta Beltline. Anybody know the Atlanta Beltline? Oh, wow. See, I tell you, most of my planners do. Atlanta Beltline is this massive infrastructure project that was overlaid on a rail corridor, abandoned rail corridor in the core of the city. And everywhere it goes, it's reshaping the city of Atlanta. So I said, oh, you need a retention strategy for that. I'm saying a lot of but I'm serious. I did. And I went out with my children in tow, because when you go into communities, you have to be human when you do so. You can't be just a planner. I would never wear this either because it's too hot in Atlanta. And reached out to homeowners and said, hey, you own this land? It's about to increase dramatically. Do you own it? Number one. As I was walking up, and they were barbecuing out there, he's like, are you trying to buy my house? I was like, actually, I like your vigilance, right? But no. We had worked with the west side of Atlanta to develop a fund to cover the tax increases for those folks. On top of that, we did estate planning, right? Because oftentimes in under-resourced and disinvested communities, they don't have estate planning. And while I was doing it, I got my own estate planning done because that's just an important thing. That's a PSA. Because the transfer of wealth, right? Who's going to get this? God forbid auntie passes away. And auntie or grandma lives there because the awnings are still there. Nobody else maintains those awnings, right? Absolutely, right? And so developing solution strategies and being thoughtful before it happens so that the people on the receiving end of the development are as excited as the developers who are trying to take their properties. So if you don't do these types of approaches, you get what you get, right? Then you get, gentrification with displacement, because gentrification can be an equitable way to, revitalize a community, but with displacement, it's obviously a negative thing. So Really quickly, this was the map that we were able to produce to get a sense of how growth had occurred over a particular time period, where those areas were that were sort of hot markets so that you needed to do some prevention strategies and retention strategies to deploy. Again, the goal here is I started off by telling you what planning is, has to have a vision. I started off by aligning the fact that you got to have a list of things that you value, things that you want to retain, and you have to have money to execute against it. And you have to protect those things that exist already if they are vulnerable in ways that you don't want to see changed. So turning the corner. Bless you. How do you go about accomplishing something of this scale scope with the context that we have here in Colorado? I don't know. I'm just kidding. Right. That's what she's gonna do. No, I think that it starts with, oddly enough, what I heard in Mexico City yesterday. They're planning, first of all, it's 22 million people. I don't know. Raise your hand if you've been to Mexico City. Okay, that's incredible. They mapped the experiences of multiple people within the city so that they could get an understanding of how people really move throughout the city at multiple income levels so that they could tie removal of barriers to movement within the city through their mapping process. They established a vision, and they have far greater and more dire, I would argue, problems than we have. They're built on a volcano, a lake or a lagoon. There are volcanoes actively around it, and they have a shortage of water. It's like anyway. It was very interesting to hear the way they're approaching development, approaching scale, and approaching. So I talked to the planner that's there, and she literally said, no, we mapped the boundaries. We got out and into the streets and developed a way of understanding ourselves that could be translated to anybody coming and anybody there in the language that those folks spoke. So again, there are opportunities, there are ready models, and there are ways that you can do it. It's you. It's me. And I'm fortunate because I am the executive director of ULI Colorado. We can provide the means by which you can make this happen. The rooms that you need to stay in for long periods of time with lots of coffee and hopefully not Red Bull, but maybe Red Bull, and get and work through these things. Because again, one of the beauties of this conversation, one of the beauties of this gathering is there are so many diverse perspectives here. There are so many professionals who know exactly what they're doing. There was an engineer in here before. I love engineers. The way they think is, yeah. Talking to them is a little bit of a challenge, but still, if you can get over that, then you can make sure that you can communicate. But I would challenge all of you to evaluate these methods, evaluate the practicality of implementing these methods. Perhaps look at what you have as an existing framework, interrogate that existing framework, and lend your voices to making it happen. So I'll close with that.